What's going on, guys? Greg here, and welcome back to the Car ID channel. Today, I've got my 93 Ford Bronco back in the shop and on the lift, because here's the deal. Now, I bought this as a project truck. This was something that I could work on, drive, and enjoy as I fix up. I'm actually gonna need to turn this thing into a daily driver in less than a month, so it's gotta be 100% roadworthy. Now, I went to go get this thing aligned after doing all the suspension work, and we found two main problems. Number one, the U-joints in the front axle shafts are binding so bad that the steering wheel is actually not returning to center as it should. Number two, the ball joints do have play on either side, so we wouldn't get an accurate alignment one way or the other. So I've got to get that dealt with. So here's what we're going to be installing. I've got all new upper and lower ball joints from AC Delco. Some new seals, bearings seem to be in good shape right now. We'll probably repack those, put those back in. New U-joints as well for that front axle. And instead of putting back those original auto locking hubs from Ford that always tend to fail, I got a new set of manual locking hubs from Warren. I gotta stop talking, I need to start thrashing, because like I said, this truck has to be roadworthy like yesterday. So let's get started. Anyway, this entire spindle's got to come off. This slides over the axle shaft here before we can get the entire knuckle off. And the ABS sensor also has to come out. It's got that really rotted bolt on the back side. So let's hope and pray that we can get that sucker out without breaking it. And while we're messing with the ABS sensor, we're gonna soak these puppies down because, as you can see, they're probably gonna take some effort to get out. Ooh. Oh. Somebody was looking out for us right there. Let me tell you. Oh, that's nice. We'll clean this sucker up and put it back on, and we can reassemble everything. This ABS sensor, wheel speed sensor in the hub, doesn't want to come out. It's quite rusty. Rotted, seized, all the above. So what I'm going to do instead is just unplug the connector from the top onto the engine bay, and we're just going to go ahead and take the whole knuckle out with the harness and worry about getting that out of the steering knuckle when it's out of the truck. So I'm going to lower this down. This should be our guy for this side. And there you have it. Well, this was total and complete carnage. So it looks like we're gonna need a new wheel speed sensor on this side to be dealt with. And all because this bottom bolt was rounded off on the back side, so we couldn't get off the casting that actually held it in place. So we'll keep this. I don't know, I have to fix it if I can't get another one. Nice. There we go. Well, I didn't mean to, but yeah, this is, here's our axle shaft, or one of them. Oh, no, no. This is the driver's side axle shaft, and these are the U-joints that we're replacing. Not only are they're falling out of this thing, I mean, God, who knows if these have ever been replaced. So, this had to come out anyway.
All right, so now with all that off, we can actually get to the knuckle itself, so we can take this off and get these ball joints out. I mean, it's no freaking secret here. I mean, look at these things. They are super old, crusty. Who knows how long they've been in there. I'm assuming they've been replaced because there is this camber shim, but it was probably a long time ago. So we've been soaking these things. I'm hoping they'll spin off. If not, what I'll end up doing is actually just cutting the castle nut and just chiseling the rest of it off. Son of a gun. This guy, however, go ahead and look in there. Tell me if you see a resemblance of an actual nut whatsoever. You just say no. There we go. Ha ha! Looks like that's all she needed. Wow.
All right, this sucker's really been fighting us. I'm gonna still try to get this ABS sensor out with a little bit more violence, and then I'll try to clean this up with a wire brush as best I possibly can, because this is like really, really crusty. That snap ring on the bottom's got to come out too to get that ball joint out, but we'll get to that in a second. Let's see if we can get this out. There we go. Yeah, this has got to come off before we even think about attempting to press that ball joint out. That's holding it in.
Oh yeah! Piece of cake. All right, guys, new ball joints going in. I decided to go with AC Delco stuff, just good quality repair parts. If you guys are doing this yourself, you're gonna need upper and lower ball joints or part number 46D2156A or 46D0048A, upper and lower part numbers. Of course, available at carid.com. Anyway, what we're gonna have to do is actually press the lower one in first, because the tool has to go through, same as we got them out. If you notice, I went ahead and cleaned up the seats of where the ball joints are going to be pressed in to make sure there's no debris. Honestly, the one up here is a little chewed up. It's got some oxidation on it. It's going to be fine though. So we're not really going to worry about it. Let's go ahead and get this set up though. So. Nice. Go ahead and get our little boot on. There we go. Snap ring. Woo! Top set up. Let's press it in. Let's get our boot on. All right, guys. Here's that driver's side front axle shaft, and why we're replacing it is for this reason. You can see how incredibly loose these U-joints are. Like, actually come over this way. You see how this is like, there's like, look at that, absolute slop. So this is a no-go, and actually moving it this way, which is how the truck would steer, it is super tight. So that's where that binding was. One way or the other, these are shot. So it's gotta come apart. Now I just tested the U-joints I have. I'm concerned I may have gotten the wrong ones because they look a little too large. So we'll have to figure that out. I want to get this out and then I'll compare them. Hopefully they're the right ones. If not, maybe we can get a, that looks like a Spicer part number. We might be able to pull that and see exactly what we need. So I'll show you in the new U-joints. But these are the needle bearings, and they're bearings. So they're essentially like, you know, small little rollers or cylinders, and that's what the U-joint spins on. Look at it. Every single one of these is literally fused together. Like this, all these needle bearings are just seized. It is one solid piece now. No wonder this was so bad and it was binding. That's terrible. There we go. Or maybe not. Close. All right, guys, so clearly that was not your standard U-joint replacement procedure. These things were really frozen in there. So here's where we're at. Everything is in pieces at this point. I'm gonna get a bunch of wire brushes that I just picked up, clean up the bores that the caps sit in, as well as the U-joint or the yoke itself. Get all this rust and corrosion off. Essentially how this sits is the end of the yoke for the axle shaft is going to slide into the spindle. This seal is all torn up and destroyed. I'm trying to find one locally because that will need to be replaced before we reassemble all this. So right now, full cleanup phase of all this stuff, get all the rust and corrosion off of it, and then start putting the U-joints in. So let's do that. So this side concerns me a little bit. Looks like whoever put U-joints this thing in the past, I'm not sure when, kind of pushed the metal here so it's actually protruding up where the cap needs to be pressed in. So we may have to grind that down a tad bit just to make sure it goes in okay. The high spot. I don't want to make this out of round. Step by step, little by little. All right, guys, second attempt here. So the entry-level, inexpensive GMB U-joints didn't really work well. They weren't pressing all the way in to be able to actually get the C-clips on. So I went out and I ended up getting the Moogs. First big difference that I see is in the caps themselves. Notice how this is a whole lot more tapered and rounded on the Moog version because it does have to get through that knuckle than the GMB. I already think that this is going to work a lot better. These are more expensive, but I will tell you, as long as the installation goes smoother, it is well worth the extra investment because I just want to get this truck together. And like any other project, spent way too much time running back and forth to get parts. So let's go ahead and get this one pressed in. We're going to want to just kind of feed this in. Get our caps in. One cap pressed in beautifully. The second one, probably gonna just kind of tap in myself. So this is what we're gonna have to do. We're gonna have to hold the actual drive shaft here, tap that down a little bit further, get one of the C-clips on. Then once that's on, flip it back over, tap that down, and be able to get the other C-clip in. A little bit stubborn on such an old truck with some worn parts, but as you can see, everything's pretty much in there. A little grease is coming out, that's totally fine. And all the C-clips are in there as well. So really, this is set to get reassembled on the truck. All right, guys, here's the deal. I'm waiting on the axle shaft end seal for the driver's side, and I can't put anything together until I get that. So to keep moving forward, I'm gonna start tearing apart the passenger side because, like I said, this thing's gotta hit the road. So remember how I said these U-joints were so seized and they were binding so bad, and that's why I couldn't get aligned, because the steering wouldn't move freely? Right now, there is no steering attached to the spindle or knuckle whatsoever. And that is how hard it is, oops, this wire's stuck, to actually turn the steering. That is no good. That's a lot of effort. That should be moving back and forth very freely.
guy.
All right, new seals for the axle end shafts. Those just have to be pressed on. Anyway, 100 foot-pounds in the bottom. More than good. Now this guy we gotta line up for the cotter pin. All right, axle shaft going back in with our new U-joints. The biggest thing is just getting this thing lined up with the diff. Some of it's really all just about feel. Oh, we're looking good. That's it. Line it back up with the splines. She's back in. There we go. Beautiful. Just gonna take a little coat of grease on the axle shaft, on the end, where that bearing is going to ride, and just a touch on this seal. All right, guys, just making sure the seal is in place on the end of the axle shaft. Nice light coat of grease. Get our spindle on there. Make sure the hole for the ABS sensor is exposed. It lines up correctly. That looks good. All right, ABS sensor ready to go in. If you guys recall, I had to butcher the old one because the ABS sensor shield on this side didn't really want to come off. So it ended up actually cracking the case. Here's the deal, I'm putting it back together. Without it, the ABS should function just fine. Without that cover, it's simply just going to be prone to some dirt and dust and whatnot. The only reason I'm doing that is because that piece is simply it's not reproduced. Therefore, I can't find one right now in any local junkyard, and this truck's got to go together. So at some point, I may take it back apart and fix it, but right now, I don't have that kind of time. And for shits and giggles, though, let's see here. If this needs to sit like so. No way. Was not expecting that. So one of the things I want to do before I put this all back together is clean and repack the bearings. This is the outer bearing. I'm going to get this all cleaned up, and then I'm going to pop the seal out of the back of the rotor and also take out the rear bearing and do the exact same thing and repack these with fresh grease. So what I'm just trying to do, same as before, just get as much as this old grease out of here, and we're going to repack bearings and put in as much new fresh grease as possible. Now, if you guys are unfamiliar with an older setup like this, most older vehicles that use a spindle will have an inner an outer wheel bearing, tapered roller bearing, that resides inside the hub of the rotor. And it was really common to service these things is to, take them out, repack them, put new grease in every so often. Most new vehicles all use sealed hub bearings, so you don't see any of this. All right, now it's time to pack the bearings with new fresh grease. Now, there are actually bearing packers out there that you literally just insert the bearing into a tub of grease. It's got a cone that goes inside it, pushes it down, fills it up, packed, done. We don't have one. It's really something that's more common if you work in a shop. Usually they have one that's a communal tool. For this case, we're gonna go old school. Put a bunch of grease in the palm of your hand, and the back side of the tapered roller bearing has this opening where the inner race meets the outer cage where the rollers sit. And you're simply gonna go around and just cram grease into that crevice. What you're doing is just making sure that the roller bearings inside the cage are fully immersed. We're just gonna keep going around until you start seeing greased. See how it's pushing out the other side? That's how you know they're pretty much good to go. Before I go ahead and just dump her on in there, I'm just gonna take another big swab, put it all around the race and the inner barrel. Yeah, why not? A little bit more, right? Can't hurt. This kind of stuff, more grease is never necessarily a bad thing. Take our newly freshly packed bearing, go ahead and drop it into the race. Okay, with the new bearing in place, now we get to put our seal in. This outer lip is going to stick out the back. And what I'm going to do is get a block of wood and we will just pound that in evenly. There we go. All right, we're ready to get the rotor and hub assembly back onto the truck with our repacked inner bearing and seal. We'll gently put that on. Beautiful. Then we will take our new repacked outer bearing, get that in there. Perfect. All right, now we can start reassembling the entire hub. To seat the bearings, you have to kind of rock the rotor back and forth as you crank it down to 50 foot-pounds, which I don't know how I'm gonna do that. So it's saying, go ahead, torque it down 50 foot-pounds, which we just did, and then back it off 45 degrees. Let's first just make sure. Wow. It's 45 degrees. All right, now I'm just trying to make sure that I align the washer with the dowel pin on the back lock nut. And it's keyed, so it has to key onto the axle, or onto the spindle, that is. All right, now the outer lock washer, or lock nut, is going in. This one, we're gonna torque down to 150 foot-pounds, which is as tight as I'm gonna be able to get it. Boom. Last but not least, the spline washer. That's gonna go on. Pretty much all the factory stuff is together for the hub. I'll probably just go ahead and slap the brake caliper on the pads just to get that out of the way, and then I can actually put in those new worn locking hubs, which I'm really excited about. There we go. All right, guys, Warn makes it super easy to install these manual locking hubs. You're gonna take the actual hub body, put it onto the spline shaft of the axle, push it in. Now, this is after that you've taken out any of the factory washers and retaining C-clip, which we just removed. I had them in there, totally forgot that they need to be out. What that does is that gives you access to the little recess in the end of the axle shaft, which is where we're going to install the snap ring. You may need to provide a little bit of persuasion on the axle shaft on the U-joint just to push it forward to be able to get the snap ring out. See, like just like that? Can I do this? All right, next there's a little ridge inside the hub assembly, and this clip is gonna sit in there to hold everything in place, make sure nothing pops out. And then finally, make sure the hub itself is in the free position. If it's in the lock position, you're not gonna be able to get the cap on. Line the cap up. I wanna make sure your gasket's in place. And then you can start threading a couple of your bolts in, and that's it. Here's the easiest way to show if these work. So if you can actually look in here at the axle shaft. All right, see, we're spinning the rotor right now. Nothing's moving. Go ahead, lock it, axle, now turning. There you go. Unlock to free, go back one, hear it click out, hub's free again.
All right, guys, there you have it. New ball joints, U-joints, and worn manual locking hubs. Hope you enjoyed the video, and if you're doing this on your Ford Bronco, I hope it helps you get the install done. Make sure, if you haven't yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And as always, I'm Greg from CarID.com. I'll see you guys next time.